They say sorry when someone bumps into them on the street, apologize for asking simple questions, and feel overwhelming guilt for merely taking up space in the world. Sound familiar to you or someone you know right now? This isn't politeness, kindness, or good manners. This is something far deeper, something quieter, something that lives beneath their words, constantly whispering. They don't deserve to exist without permission from others around them. Let me show you what is really happening beneath the surface. There is an invisible weight some people carry with them everywhere they go, pressing down on their shoulders like stones, making them physically and emotionally shrink before they even speak a single word to anyone. They apologize for breathing too loud in quiet rooms, for existing in what they perceive as the wrong moment, for being noticed at all by anyone who crosses their path during the day. But here is the truth. Most people won't tell you about this. This isn't about manners, etiquette, or being respectful to others whatsoever. It is about survival mechanisms they developed years ago in childhood. Think about the child who learned early that speaking up meant harsh punishment from caregivers, that expressing even basic needs meant cold rejection and dismissal, and that taking up any space meant losing the love they desperately needed to survive. That child grows up into an adult with a job and responsibilities. But the fear doesn't leave their nervous system. It just changes form, adapts, and continues to control their every interaction with the world. It becomes a reflex they can't control, an automatic response that fires before conscious thought, a psychological shield against imagined threats that feel terrifyingly real and immediate to them, despite being harmless. Every excessive apology is actually a negotiation with ghosts from the past, ghosts of anger they once witnessed, ghosts of disappointment they absorbed as children, ghosts of abandonment they've never fully processed or healed from over the years. The person apologizing in front of you isn't really talking to you at all, but rather they're talking to someone from their past. Someone who made them feel incredibly small and worthless when they were too young to defend themselves. Someone who taught them through words or actions that their very existence was an inconvenience, a burden, something to be minimized and apologized for constantly to avoid further pain or rejection. Research shows this pattern often begins in specific childhood environments where criticism was constant and unrelenting, where mistakes weren't opportunities for growth, but crimes punishable by withdrawal of love, and where perfection was the only acceptable standard for receiving affection, where love felt conditional on perfect behavior and meeting impossible standards at all times. The child learned a brutal equation that became hardwired into their brain. Visibility equals vulnerability and danger. Presence equals punishment and pain. So they learned to make themselves smaller, quieter, and less noticeable to survive emotionally, to apologize for existing before anyone could reject them for it first. But there is something darker underneath this pattern that most people miss entirely when they observe chronic apologizers. These apologies aren't just about fear of punishment or rejection. They're also about control and managing the emotional environment around them constantly. When someone apologizes constantly for everything they do, they're attempting to manage other people's emotions before those emotions even emerge, to prevent anger before it arrives in the room, and to control the narrative before any conflict has a chance to develop or escalate. It is a preemptive strike against the rejection they're certain is coming. But here is the paradox that traps them in a cycle they can't escape. The more they apologize for simply existing in space, the less authentic their relationships become over time, and people grow frustrated and exhausted with the constant stream of unnecessary apologies that require reassurance and emotional labor from them. The apologizer senses this frustration building in others around them, so naturally they apologize even more. It is a downward spiral that feeds itself, a self-fulfilling prophecy where the very behavior meant to prevent rejection actually creates it, pushing people away while desperately trying to pull them closer through constant apologies. Let's look deeper at what is happening psychologically inside their minds every single day. Because the chronic apologizer operates from what psychologists call an external locus of control, meaning they believe everything happening around them is somehow their direct responsibility. They believe someone else having a bad day must be their fault somehow. A conversation going quiet means they caused it. A project failing means they should have prevented it through better performance or awareness. This worldview is absolutely exhausting mentally and physically, placing them at the center of every negative event. But here's the psychological twist. Nobody talks about openly. It also gives them a strange sense of power and control over chaos. If everything bad is their fault, then they theoretically have control over outcomes. They can fix problems. They can prevent disasters next time if they just apologize enough and behave perfectly from now on. It is psychologically better than accepting the terrifying truth that most of what happens in life isn't about them at all, that the universe is indifferent to their existence, and their apologies can't actually control other people's emotions or prevent bad things from happening. The apologizer also struggles with something even deeper than control issues alone, a fundamental fracture in their sense of self-worth that makes them feel undeserving. Not undeserving of specific things like success or love specifically, undeserving of existence itself, of taking up oxygen and space in the world. They walk through every single day as if their presence is an imposition on others, as if they're borrowing space they haven't earned through good behavior, as if simply being alive requires constant justification and apology to everyone around them. This isn't humility, because true humility acknowledges limitations while maintaining a sense of inherent worth and dignity. This is something else entirely. Something more sinister. This is self-erasure disguised as politeness. This is psychological suicide in slow motion. This is someone who believes deep down they shouldn't exist at all. Women experience this pattern more frequently than men according to multiple research studies, because cultural conditioning teaches them from childhood to prioritize others' comfort over their own needs constantly and without complaint, to smooth social interactions by absorbing tension, to make themselves smaller, so others can feel larger and more important. But men experience it too, particularly those raised in environments where emotional expression was punished, or where parental approval was inconsistent, unpredictable, and tied to performance rather than unconditional love. The pattern often traces back to specific types of childhood experiences that might not seem dramatic to outsiders looking in. But sometimes the quietest wounds cut the deepest and leave the longest-lasting scars on a developing child's psyche. A parent who gave love inconsistently, who was warm and affectionate one day, but cold and distant the next without explanation. The child couldn't predict what would bring approval or what would bring rejection, so they learned to apologize for absolutely everything, desperately hoping to stumble upon the right formula for consistent acceptance and love from their caregiver. Or consider the child who grew up with a parent struggling with their own unresolved mental health issues, where the child learned to walk on eggshells constantly, to monitor parental moods with hypervigilance, and to preemptively apologize to prevent emotional explosions or withdrawal. That hypervigilance becomes hardwired into their nervous system and brain structure over years. It doesn't disappear when childhood ends and they move out. It just finds new targets, new people to monitor, new situations to manage, through constant apologies and self-erasure in hopes of maintaining peace. Then there is the perfectionist household where anything less than excellence was treated as complete failure, where mistakes were catastrophized and blown out of proportion, where the child learned that being imperfect meant being fundamentally unlovable and worthy of rejection, so they apologize for their humanness constantly, for the inevitable flaws that prove they don't measure up to impossible standards, for needing help, for making mistakes, for not being perfect machines incapable of error or weakness. But here's what makes this pattern so insidious and difficult to break. It becomes completely invisible to the person doing it every single day. They don't realize they're apologizing excessively or inappropriately. It feels normal, natural, like breathing. Ask them about their apologizing habit directly, however, and watch the recognition flash across their face, followed immediately by what predictable response? An apology for apologizing too much, proving the point perfectly. The chronic apologizer lives in a state of perpetual anxiety that never fully subsides, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, constantly scanning for microscopic signs of displeasure in every face they encounter throughout the day, interpreting neutral expressions as hidden disappointment, silence as barely contained anger about something they did wrong. Their nervous system stays activated in fight or flight mode constantly. Stress hormones flood their body at minor social interactions that others would find completely neutral, and the body never fully relaxes or feels safe even in familiar environments. This has real consequences beyond just annoying people around them, or seeming overly polite to strangers they encounter. It affects career advancement significantly, because constant apologies in professional settings signal incompetence and lack of confidence to supervisors and colleagues. Excessive apologies undermine their authority in leadership positions, make others question their judgment and decision-making abilities, and someone who apologizes for their ideas before presenting them won't be trusted with important decisions or promotions to higher positions. In personal relationships, excessive apologizing creates emotional distance that grows wider over time. Partners grow weary of constant reassurance, seeking that drains their emotional energy. Friends feel unable to be authentic or express genuine feelings honestly, because every interaction requires carefully managing the apologizer's anxiety and fragile emotional state. The relationship becomes about the apologizer's comfort. Ironically, even as they insist loudly on prioritizing everyone else's needs above their own, creating a dynamic that feels suffocating and inauthentic to both parties involved in the relationship. There is also a subtle aggression hidden in chronic apologizing that most people don't recognize consciously but feel intuitively. It forces others into a particular role without their consent. The forgiver, the reassurer, the emotional manager. The constant apologizer makes others responsible for granting absolution repeatedly, for reassuring them that they're okay, for managing their emotional state and anxiety so they can function, which is exhausting for everyone involved and creates resentment over time. It is a form of control disguised as submission and self-deprecation. So what is happening in the brain physiologically during these interactions, according to neuroscience research? Studies reveal that chronic apologizers show heightened activity in brain regions associated with threat detection and fear processing. Their amygdala stays overactive constantly, perceiving danger in neutral social situations that others would find completely harmless and normal, treating every interaction as a potential threat to their safety or social standing that must be managed immediately. Meanwhile, their prefrontal cortex struggles to regulate these fear responses effectively. The rational brain can't override the emotional alarm system. This creates a feedback loop that strengthens over time with repetition and reinforcement. The apologizer's anxiety makes them hyper-aware of others' reactions. This hyper-awareness increases anxiety levels further, which leads to more apologies, which creates more negative reactions from exhausted people around them, and the pattern reinforces itself constantly without intervention. But there is hope for chronic apologizers despite how entrenched this pattern feels, because unlike personality traits which are relatively fixed, behavior can change with conscious effort, and neural pathways can be rewired through consistent practice and new experiences over time. The first step toward change is developing awareness without self-judgment or shame about the behavior. Notice the apologies as they happen, count them throughout the day. See the pattern clearly without harsh criticism, just neutral observation of what is actually happening in real time during interactions with others. The second step involves understanding the specific triggers that activate this apologizing behavior in their daily life. What situations prompt excessive apologizing most frequently? Who are they with when it happens at its worst intensity? What emotions precede the apology? Fear, shame, anxiety, guilt. This investigative process isn't about blame or finding fault with themselves, but rather it is about mapping the territory of their inner world, understanding the landscape of their emotional patterns and psychological wounds that drive this behavior automatically. Then comes the harder work that requires real courage and commitment over time, learning to tolerate the discomfort of not apologizing when every instinct screams at them to do it immediately, sitting with the anxiety that rises, letting it build without responding to it with their usual pattern, watching it peak, and then naturally subside without disaster occurring, which teaches their nervous system that the fear is disproportionate to actual danger present. This feels dangerous to them initially, like standing at the edge of a cliff preparing to jump into empty air, but it is absolutely necessary for breaking the cycle that has controlled them for years or decades. They need to practice new responses that feel unnatural at first, replacing old patterns with healthier alternatives that maintain connection without self-erasure. And when someone waits, they say thank you for your patience instead of sorry for the delay. When they have an opinion that differs from others, they state it directly, instead of prefacing with unnecessary apologies and disclaimers. These small shifts feel monumental to someone who has been apologizing their entire life, because they are monumental. They're reclaiming space they'd given away without realizing it, asserting their right to exist, and challenging beliefs that have controlled them since childhood about their inherent unworthiness and burden on others around them. They also need to examine the beliefs underneath the behavior with brutal honesty and compassion toward themselves. The core assumptions driving the automatic apologizing need to be identified and questioned directly. I am a burden to everyone around me. My needs don't matter compared to others. I am only valuable when I am useful and pleasing. These beliefs formed early when they were children without critical thinking skills. They're outdated software running on adult hardware now. Time to update the programming with conscious awareness and intention. Therapy helps immensely here, particularly approaches that address both thought patterns and nervous system regulation simultaneously, rather than just one. Cognitive behavioral work can challenge distorted beliefs and replace them with realistic ones. Somatic work can help release stored tension in the body from years of hypervigilance, and trauma-informed therapy can heal the original wounds that created the pattern in childhood, addressing root causes rather than just surface symptoms. But they also need practical skills for daily life beyond therapy sessions alone to make real progress. Assertiveness training teaches them to express needs without guilt, to set boundaries without apologizing for having them, to say no without elaborate explanations, to disagree respectfully, to take up space without shrinking themselves to make others comfortable. Skills that feel completely foreign at first, like learning a new language, but with consistent practice become natural and automatic over time. The journey involves grieving too, which many people don't expect when working on this pattern but is essential. Grieving the childhood they deserved but didn't get, the unconditional acceptance that should have been theirs by birthright. This grief is necessary for healing and moving forward. It is not wallowing in victimhood or staying stuck. but rather it is acknowledging what was lost, so they can stop searching for it in the wrong places through constant apologies. They'll also need to develop self-compassion, to treat themselves with the kindness they've been giving everyone else, to recognize their inherent worth isn't tied to productivity or agreeableness, to understand they don't need to earn the right to exist, they already have it. This shift doesn't happen overnight. Old patterns have deep roots. The brain resists change because familiarity feels safe, even when that familiarity is painful. But gradually, neurology adjusts. New pathways strengthen, old ones weaken. The default response begins to shift. They might stumble. Old triggers might activate old responses. That is expected. Growth isn't linear. What matters is noticing, however, and choosing differently next time. Each small choice accumulates. Each moment of non-apology builds strength. Eventually, something shifts. They realize they went through an entire conversation without apologizing unnecessarily. They stated a need directly. They disagreed without softening it with self-deprecation, and nothing terrible happened. The world didn't end. People didn't abandon them. This realization is powerful. It contradicts everything their nervous system has been telling them for years. It provides evidence that their fears aren't facts, that their worth isn't conditional, that they can exist without constant justification. The transformation isn't about becoming careless or insensitive. It is about calibrating their responses appropriately, apologizing when genuine harm occurred, not apologizing for existing, for having needs, for taking space. It is about differentiation, knowing the difference between appropriate remorse and unnecessary self-diminishment. As they change, their relationships shift too. Some people won't like the new version. Those who benefited from their self-erasure, those who enjoyed having someone manage their emotions for them, let them go. They were never truly seeing the real person anyway. But new relationships emerge, healthier ones, based on mutual respect rather than placation. People who appreciate authenticity over performance, who value presence over appeasement. These relationships feel different, lighter, more real, less exhausting. The chronic apologizer realizes they've been living as a ghost for years, present physically, but not really there, emotionally, visible to others, but not truly seen for who they actually are underneath the performance. Always performing the role of the accommodating one, always managing everyone's emotions but their own, never resting or feeling safe. What would it feel like to just be themselves without justification, without apology, without shrinking themselves to fit others' expectations, without constant monitoring and adjusting to avoid perceived rejection or disappointment from others? This question terrifies them initially when they first consider it seriously, and honestly in therapy or self-reflection. Because if they stop performing this role, they've played their entire lives. Who are they really underneath it all? If they stop managing everyone's emotions and taking responsibility for others' feelings, what is their value to other people? What do they bring to relationships if not constant accommodation and self-sacrifice for others' comfort? But beneath that fear lies something else they've been avoiding their entire lives, consciously or unconsciously, through busyness and people-pleasing. Their actual self waiting patiently to be discovered and expressed. The person they were before the world taught them to apologize constantly. The self that has strong opinions worth expressing, that takes space confidently, that makes mistakes without collapsing into shame spirals that last for days, that exists not because they've earned it through perfect behavior, but because they're human. And being human is enough justification for existence. Always has been. Always will be. This journey from excessive apology to authentic presence isn't about becoming someone new or developing a fake persona to present to the world. It is about uncovering who they've always been beneath the protective layers developed in childhood, beneath the fear of rejection, beneath the conditioning from critical parents, beneath the protective strategies that once served them, but now imprison them in inauthenticity. There is a person who deserves to exist fully without apologies. The transformation affects everything in their life once it truly takes root and becomes their new normal after months of practice. Career trajectory improves dramatically because they advocate for themselves and their ideas without unnecessary disclaimers. Relationships deepen significantly because they show up authentically rather than performing agreeableness constantly. Mental health stabilizes as chronic anxiety decreases without constant threat monitoring, and the energy previously spent monitoring and apologizing becomes available for actually living life fully and pursuing meaningful goals. They discover creativity they'd suppressed for years, passions they'd ignored because they seemed selfish to pursue, boundaries they'd never known they could set with family and friends. Life expands in unexpected ways when you stop making yourself smaller to accommodate everyone else's needs first. When you stop apologizing for the space you occupy in the world. When you recognize your presence as a gift to others, not an imposition. When you understand that authentic connection requires two whole people, not one person constantly erasing themselves. But the real shift happens internally in the quiet moments when nobody's watching their performance anymore because they're no longer performing at all, when they notice themselves relaxing in conversation without monitoring every word for potential offense they might cause, when they express a need without the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in their chest and stomach, anticipating rejection, when they realize they're no longer scanning every face for microscopic signs of disapproval or disappointment in them. They're actually present in the moment, experiencing life directly, rather than through the filter of constant anxiety about how others perceive them. This presence changes how others experience them too, in subtle but profound ways that improve all their relationships over time. People respond differently when someone shows up fully authentic without masks or performance, obscuring their real personality. There is a groundedness they exude now, an authenticity that others recognize immediately, a quiet confidence that comes from self-knowledge and self-acceptance, rather than constant external validation, not arrogance or superiority, but self-possession and the sense that this person knows their worth now. The chronic apologizer learns that true politeness isn't self-erasure or constant accommodation regardless of personal cost to themselves. It is respectful presence that considers others' feelings without erasing your own needs completely from the equation, taking responsibility for actual harm done, without taking responsibility for others' emotions that aren't yours to manage, being courteous without being servile or submissive, being kind without being self-sacrificing to the point of losing yourself completely in service to others' comfort. They learn the crucial difference between genuine remorse that serves relationship repair and habitual appeasing that serves fear of rejection or abandonment alone. Remorse serves connection and healing, appeasing serves anxiety, and maintains emotional distance ironically. One is honest and vulnerable and builds intimacy. The other is a protective mask that prevents real connection from forming between people, keeping everyone at arm's length emotionally while appearing to bring them closer through constant accommodation. Gradually, over months and years of consistent practice, they develop what they've never had before in their entire lives, a solid sense of self that exists independently, not dependent on others' approval or validation to feel worthy of existence and love, not contingent on perfect performance or constant accommodation of others' needs above their own, not requiring constant validation from external sources to know they have value, but rather a self that exists independently with inherent value regardless of what others think. This doesn't mean they become selfish or inconsiderate of others' feelings and needs in relationships and interactions moving forward in life. It means they become whole human beings finally for the first time ever. And wholeness benefits everyone around them too, because people who know their worth deeply don't need to diminish others to feel valuable themselves. They don't need to control through manipulation or constant emotional management. They can give from fullness and abundance, not depletion and emptiness, creating healthier dynamics in all relationships. The journey from chronic apologizing to authentic presence is one of the most profound transformations a human being can make in their lifetime. It is returning home to themselves after years of exile from their true nature and personality. It is reclaiming territory they'd surrendered without realizing it was happening gradually over years. It is waking up from a dream of unworthiness that felt like reality, stepping into a new reality where they're allowed to exist without justification. But it requires courage to walk this path of transformation and healing from years of conditioning that runs deep in their psyche and nervous system. The courage to disappoint people who've grown accustomed to their constant accommodation and self-erasure in service of others' comfort above their own well-being, to set boundaries that some will resent or push back against, to be misunderstood by people who liked the old version better, to risk rejection by showing up fully authentic instead of performing agreeableness constantly to maintain connection. Trust that those who truly care will appreciate the real person emerging, not the appeasing performance they've been watching for years. And here is what they discover on the other side of this transformation, after doing the hard work consistently over time, with support and practice. Freedom in its truest form, the freedom to be imperfect without shame spiraling into self-hatred for days afterward. To have needs just like every other human being on earth, to exist without constant justification or explanation to anyone, the freedom to say no without elaborate explanations defending their boundaries, to disagree respectfully, to take up space confidently, the freedom to be human fully and unapologetically in all their messy complexity and imperfection. So if you recognize yourself in these words, if you've been apologizing your way through life for years or decades, consider this invitation carefully and honestly. What would happen if you stopped apologizing for things that don't require apologies or remorse at all? Not suddenly overnight, which would feel too jarring and anxiety-provoking, but gradually over weeks and months. What if you paused before the next automatic apology rises to your lips? What if you asked yourself this critical question every single time? Did I actually do something wrong that requires repair? Or am I just existing in a way that makes me anxious, because I was taught my existence is an imposition. What if you replaced half your apologies with simple statements of fact or direct requests for what you need, with honest expressions of need that don't apologize for having needs in the first place, treating your needs as legitimate and worthy of consideration, just like everyone else's needs deserve consideration? What if you allowed yourself to be inconvenient sometimes without catastrophizing the consequences, or believing it makes you a terrible person worthy of rejection? Take time when you need it, to ask questions when you are confused, to have preferences and opinions that differ from those around you. What if you trusted deeply that people who truly value you won't be driven away by your authentic presence, but will actually appreciate finally meeting the real you underneath the performance? What if the very thing you've been apologizing for your entire life, your existence, your needs, your humanness, your imperfection, is exactly what makes you worthy of love and belonging? Not worthy because you've earned it through perfect behavior or constant accommodation of others' needs above your own well-being. Worthy simply because you are human, and being human comes with inherent dignity and value that doesn't need to be earned or justified to anyone, not even to yourself. The person who apologizes too much isn't weak or broken beyond repair. They're surviving a world that once punished them severely for being visible and taking up space. But survival strategies that worked brilliantly in childhood become prisons in adulthood that limit their potential and authentic self-expression. The cage that once protected them from harm now contains them and limits their growth, and they're the only one who holds the key to unlock it. Nobody else can do this work for them. Opening that cage doesn't require permission from anyone else in their life. It doesn't require anyone's approval or validation to begin the process. It just requires a choice they make for themselves alone. The choice to stop asking for forgiveness for existing in the world. The choice to occupy space without justification or elaborate explanations defending their right to be here. The choice to be present fully and without apology for who they actually are underneath the performance. This is the invitation being extended to anyone who recognizes themselves in this description of chronic apologizing and people-pleasing, to stop performing worthiness through constant accommodation and start inhabiting your inherent worth. To stop earning existence through perfect behavior and start claiming it as your birthright as a human being. To stop apologizing for being human with all its messiness and imperfection and complexity. Because being human with all its flaws is enough. It has always been enough. You've always been enough just as you are, even when nobody told you that growing up. So ask yourself this final question and sit with it uncomfortably without rushing to answer or dismiss it immediately with another apology. What would your life look like if you stopped apologizing for who you are, authentically underneath the masks and performance you've been maintaining for years or decades?